So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our first InfoSec seminar in 2024, organized by the Information System Security and Assurance Management Department in Halshan School of Management. We begin our January InfoSec seminar by acknowledging that although this seminar is being held virtually, Concordia University of Edmonton is located on Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous people, including Cree, Salto, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux people. We respect and acknowledge this. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Alison Yakshan, our CUES Dean of Management, who joined us today for this great InfoSec seminar. So today, we are pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Prashant Prashant, to give us an interesting talk about Let's Make Fun of Cybersecurity. Prashant has a bachelor's and master's in IT from India and 14 years of IT experience in Canada, various industry verticals. He works as a senior cybersecurity advisor and a Fortune 500. He calls himself a geek with a purpose. He likes to support the budding talent, shares his experience, and to continue to progress the cybersecurity discipline in industry, academia, and research fields. He considers himself a problem solver in solving interesting IT problems and not just cybersecurity. He has numerous research papers in the field of quantum computing, YouTube channel, and videos on quantum research. He has presented in multiple IT and security conferences over the years, such as CIPS, ISACA Edmonton, BSides Edmonton, BSides Calgary, Public Safety Canada, ICS Symposium, among others. He also has a passion for teaching cybersecurity courses in NAIT and Concordia University of Edmonton to bachelor's and master of information security management students. He likes to play chess, hike, and camp in the mountains alone and ponder over the purpose of life and nature. Thanks, Prashant, for being with us today. And one more thing, please be sure to provide us with your name and email address in the linked form given in the chatting box, so we may send your certificate of attendance. And also, Prashant will take questions at the end. Okay, so please go ahead, Prashant.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aslam, for the introduction, and thank you to the Concordia team, Dr. Sean, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Sean Aguiley, Dr. Allison, and others for giving me this opportunity to come in front of you and share with you a topic which I thought was a little bit more fun and more lighthearted humor than starting our year on a serious note. I'm not a stranger to Concordia. I have been teaching in Concordia as a sessional instructor in the past, with the latest one being last term. And so I know people around. I love students. In fact, the arena which Concordia provides to folks like me to share knowledge, help, and in the budding talent is very good. End of the day, it reminds me that I was a student one day and I was sharing and was going through these struggles, and that we always have to continue moving forward in this space. So thank you for that platform and giving this back to the students and to the community at large. Hopefully you understand a thing or two from this presentation today. Again, it's a little bit more fun, but there are some concepts there which I think is very pertinent, lighthearted, but important for all of us to know and understand. This presentation, by the way, is the one, it's my third rendering of this presentation. The first one I gave was in BSides Edmonton last year. And after that, I gave it in BSides Calgary last year. And this time when Dr. Sean reached out to me, I said, I can redo this again. I think it's a topic which never dies. And one always somebody can listen and learn and have a little bit more lighthearted understanding of cybersecurity. What you see on the screen there is, I call myself more of a cyber enthusiast and calling myself, a cybersecurity specialist or an advisor or whatnot. It's just that, the arena expands, the thought process expands as you go into this industry, and you at the end of the day become a problem solver or an enthusiast. You solve problems, and they can come from any yin and yang, from any sides. So that was like, I thought, that should I give as my introduction. What you also see on the screen is some of my coordinates. So if anybody is interested to join me in the end or connect with me online, please do so. I'm always happy to connect and share back to the society. This little funny robot baby, which is kind of struggling to come up to speed, was, I guess, my best rendering of how to start the presentation on the cyber fun. I was googling it online. I'm like, what's the best way to do it? And I found this robotic baby, and I thought, okay, well, let's make it as our first slide. So again, what you see on the
Prashant,
screen?
like, could you please hide the note in
Oh,
your
sure.
slide?
You mean this one?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Aslam. So this one is actually me putting in a costume, because costume was pretty much coming due. This is a presentation slide in B-Sides Edmonton in November, and I see Mabo laughing on that one. And I went to Walmart and it's like, how do I make it more fun? So I've tried to figure out what costumes do I have, and they actually had this costume, which I thought, well, looks like a clown, but it's a scary clown. But I still bought it and brought it onto B-Sides Edmonton in 8, and we kind of presented it. So some people laughed, some people were scared. In the middle of the presentation, I took off the hat and I was like, okay, this is me really, not the clown behind the face. And what you see also is Renderman. He's one of our cyber enthusiasts and a cyber security professional here in Edmonton, who is giving me an introduction. So I don't know what you take from this slide, but it's more like either it is funny or it is scary. We can be in either or both boats of a straight hair up or a mask of a clown, and that clown was basically just to give some feel of the fun aspect of the topic. So let's start, right? Let cartoons speak. My presentation today, I call it a little bit more incoherent because we are talking about humor. We're talking about security and cyber fun. So I'll give you topics on almost different aspects of cybersecurity, and every slide in itself is in my opinion, a story which it tells, and none of the slides might be coherent in nature. And that's probably by intent I made this presentation. If you ever see this cyber laugh icon there with that little person laughing, I expect you to laugh behind the scenes. I can see you laughing. But if you don't, then I guess I'm not doing my job properly. But we'll see. So I could have emailed you my PowerPoint presentation and you could have read it in 5 minutes. But I prefer you sit here for an hour while I read each bullet point in slow motion. Point number 1, yank this as hard as you can. So I took some of these themes from Dilbert cartoons, and some of them I also took from some other cartoon themes, just to put the point forward. Generally, cyberspeak or random blabber of topics is from a dictionary definition of blabber is to talk foolishly or incoherently. I don't know if I will do that justice to that, but I'll try my best. So it's a word cloud of fun, cyber fun. As I said, it'll be more, topics which are kind of incoherent, but they are all over the space in cybersecurity. So we'll be talking about cyber satire. We'll be talking about IT security, Murphy's Law, ransomware, script kiddies, clouds, hacker, nerds, human stupidity, cartoons, CISO scores, cyber war, disaster, privacy, password serenity prayer. In fact, when we come to the password serenity prayer slide, I'll put my hand up, and you guys can probably put your hand up too, or maybe in your minds, and we'll go through the prayer and see how much of us agree to that notion of the password serenity. And then risk management and CISO.
Why are people taking it so serious? What's going on? Everybody's so quiet.
So looks like Emmanuel. Yeah, you're. That's okay. So yeah, it's kind of that word cloud, and let's see how far we go from there. Cyber carriers, bright and the dark side. So this concept speaks to from the Neanderthals of the world right up to the Iron Mans, how a profession or a person who gets hired into the cyber profession can be mature. So, folks can be at a level 1. I don't know how many of you know what a CMMI level maturity model is. This is probably speaking to level 1 to level 5, right from the village to the NASA, right from the Neanderthals to the Iron Mans. So you can have cybersecurity profession or the career, or even in your own field when you go into work or otherwise, put yourself into a hat and say, okay, where do I stand in the life of a cyber professional? In fact, I still myself call myself to be a level 1 or a level 2. The world of cybersecurity is so vast and so broad that I'd be surprised if anybody called themselves an Iron Man. It's too hard, and and I guess Iron Man is still in my notion is still a fantasy. I know we go through these movies on Iron Man and whatnot. And the topic below, I'm interviewing for a hacker position. So this is a husband looking at his wife and his kid. I'm like, okay, I'm going to become a hacker. Like it feels a little funny, but the concept which it is trying to speak to is the fact that in security, and this is something a little bit on the serious note, I have seen, and we will always see folks who become professionals. Either they become professionals coming in from an educational background or the academic background, and they get experience, which all who are students in CUE are going through. And then you get into the job field and you move along. There is another way you can become a cyber professional. That's and it's a non-traditional way of doing it. You can go become a hacker on your own terms, get into the jail or get the FBI or the RCMP knocking at your doors, and you become famous for that. And you definitely might have to go through some legal issues before you get famous in the industry. But then after that, you come back and you get hired, and governments and institutes and private sector would hire you for your skills. And there are a history behind that. I'd encourage, if anybody's interested on this piece, to read about Kevin Mitnick. He was a great hacker of his time in the year 2000. He was a great social engineer. There's a book he has written called The Art of Deception. So you can read through that. No technology, literally by phone calls, he was able to hack in to get passwords of companies. And he went through pretty big hacks during his time. He got knocked by FBI, went into jail, served his term for whatever he got, came back, become a security consultant for the US government. And then he made his money. And I think a year or two ago, he passed away from this world. It was a pretty sad news for folks in the industry that a person of that nature, for good or for bad, he had his name in the industry, and he passed on. So yeah, different ways of how you look at security, different ways of how you look at your profession and how you can become one. Again, I'm not going to encourage you become a hacker and go that way. It's important that from a legal perspective, you go through and you learn the field, but know that there are ways people also get into this field from other ways. So it's pretty open, it's pretty wide how you see this in this industry and this career. So that's the bright side and the dark side. That's the teenage hacker room, and that's reaction on pwning the box. I don't know if you know the term, what's called a pwning the box, but when I was a kid, in fact, when I was in my college, I was a Linux enthusiast, and when I used to break into some of my computers just for fun, doing pen testing in the educational network, pretty much ensured and understood by the teams there. That was the kick I used to get. And the kick was like, when you actually get the root account on a Linux box, you feel like, oh, I accomplished something. So sometimes, that kick, that adrenaline rush we get of getting into a privileged account or getting into a system through ethical hacking means, for that matter. And that actually keeps a lot of people going in this industry. In fact, I'm one of those folks. I mean, I don't ever want to be away from technology. There are times where you can become a little bit more on the management side and go up the chain, but the more you get alienated from technology, you feel like, oh, I've missed the boat somewhere. I need to understand how technology works and keep abreast with what's going on in the industry. So a teenage hacker room, that's just a worldwide view of what these script kiddies and hackers look like. In fact, that's not a reality, by the way. These days, there are much more professional hackers who have professional means and nation state actors who spend money doing this work. But when this field started in the hacking realm, folks were like working in their basement, looking at a computer and just chugging along, sipping a lot of coffee, and they have adrenaline rush, not talking to anybody, and folks who are isolated in their own basements, right? So that's just the idea of how this field came about, from the culture of script kiddies, the culture of a nerdy sitting in a basement with his hairs, pointing out, and and to the one now where people are quite professional, they're quite ethical in the industry who do hacking ethically, and move along. But that kick, that adrenaline rush, always remains. At least for the ones for them who are in this industry and continue to move forward in this industry. Many workshops, many conferences are there, DEF CON and others, which where these nerds actually come along. So DEF CON is a conference if anybody was interested to look at what they do in US. Curse of the CISO. I hope you all know what a CISO is, a Chief Information Security Officer. Do CISOs get to hack iPhones and clouds? We mostly just fill out compliance checklists. My dad is a fireman. I guess that's cool, right? So a kid talking to the other kid, like, what do you do? So a CISO, the more you go up, and this is just me being a little bit nerdy, is that when you are more to the ground, you feel like you are learning and you are contributing. The more you become at the management level, you're just connecting the dots, managing people, process, trying to connect that, for the checklists and the compliance aspect of it. But those who are, again, in the hearts of their hearts nerdy, they miss that. And I've met a bunch of CISOs who sometimes miss their technical life, or the life where they used to get that adrenaline rush from understanding how systems work. In fact, there is a you can Google, there is a great manifesto called the Hackers Manifesto, and you go through that and read through that. It'll give you a beautiful idea of what a hacker is. A hacker is, in fact, not a bad person. A hacker is a person who is enthusiastic. He breaks into systems for good, and he makes sure that those systems and their weaknesses are aware to the asset owners who he breaks into. So they're not bad people. So there are differences between hacker, a cracker, a script kiddie, a phreaker. These are terms used in this industry. Phreaker are phone people. Script kiddies just take the scripts from the industry, from the wild on the internet, and just start bombarding and trying to hack, knowing nothing about how technology works. Hackers are the one who go deep down, try to understand, want to know what the systems do. In fact, Unix and Linux platforms and their owners, their contributors and their originators, like Linus Torvalds, and in the Unix world, in fact, it's called in the industry, in the history, that they were made by hackers. Hackers were so that terminology that they actually wanted to make something new, and so to build these operating systems out loud. So that's the curse of the CISO. Sometimes when you go up the chain, you feel like, oh, I'm missing the boat and I'm not able to connect to the ground. I mean, but it is what it is. Sometimes it's time consuming in how CISOs had to handle the industry. Are you too important to be breached? So you see a pope and you see a small kid is just going past the pope and sitting on his chair. And there's a message behind this madness is behind this message is we tend to focus on larger things, and we sometimes miss the simple things which can get us into trouble. And that is pretty relevant in the cyber industry too. When you get into the world of cybersecurity, start making money, working into the industry, you feel like you're connecting the dots on disaster recovery planning, vulnerability management, pen testing, information risk management, etc. But somewhere down the line, you probably missed the hacker who probably knows your weakness and can go in and can breach you. Right? So it is the connectivity and understanding what's important. And in that picture, it feels like you missed somebody trying to get into your system, and you're more focused on the higher aspects of things. CISO's confession, that's another one. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 12 years since my last server patch. I like what you have been doing with your third-party risk program. So for those who probably got the pun of it, there's a CISO going to the father and confessing that they have not that patched their servers for 12 years, and their vendors are lining up now. The way I interpret this, and there are multiple interpretations you can have of this, by the way, the vendors who connect to the computers or to the industry or to the systems or to the organization, if that organization's computer was not patched, it will get breached. And from there, it will start going into their vendors' networks, and their vendors' networks also get breached. And they are like, oh, we were not doing our third-party risk assessment the right way because we couldn't patch our systems properly. So it's just a way of saying things in terms of third-party risk and the message around how it can impact you. And third-party risk management, by the way, is a great field and an upcoming field in the industry, which is quite relevant. IT security, perception versus reality. So there is an IT CISO talking to a PhD, a researcher. Then there is a vendor talking to the CISO. There's a security manager talking to the compliance officer, the C-level suite. Let's go through it a little bit. PhD guy would say strengthen infrastructure controls to protect against malware and phishing by deploying risk assessment standards and policies to deploy endpoint protection. pretty deep words, pretty complex words, right? And the CISO and the IT guy would be like, okay, what do you mean by that? So sometimes when we do research, the idea here is to ensure that we connect the dots and make it relevant and speak to the public understanding of what we're doing rather than just the technicality of the research and the idea behind it. Yeah, a vendor would say, okay, buy my software, right? It's going to solve your threat. And the CISO is like, okay, when do you want me to do that? That's pretty much what vendors want to do. That's how they want to sell the product to you. And they think it's the holy grail of solving every problem. If you talk to any vendor, they're like, my product is the best in the industry. And they oversell CISOs on that. Security manager talking to the compliance officer. I know we have a MISAM program in COE. In fact, I was teaching an assurance course last term. And what would a compliance officer ask? They'll say, okay, requirement 3.5.2, do you protect CIA of your systems? Where are your logs? Are enterprise level protections applied? I was just getting coffee. That's what the security manager would say. Like, leave me alone. Let me do my job. And that's sometimes the struggle you see in the industry in terms of compliance on the audit side and folks who are being audited is that instead of being collaborative, sometimes it's a little bit of a back and forth on it. And we pass compliance, and that's what the C-suite would say, right? SOX compliance, other kind of compliance in the industry we have. We have antivirus, we have insurance, security solved. Why spend more money? That's the intent coming from a management. And these are relevant questions C-suite will ask you, whether it's the CISO, whether it is the CEO, the COO, the CFO. And in all of this, on the right, a hacker is saying they did all of this, but they missed me. The idea is when we do cybersecurity, do we have the right understanding why we are doing it for? Do we understand the impact it can have, the data security aspect, the risks the industry or the organization has to follow? And have we plugged the holes? And did we really miss looking at it from a hacker's perspective or a attacker's perspective, rather than looking at it from a management perspective, compliance perspective, research perspective, or vendor's perspective? So the idea is to narrow down the point where it's relevant. And why do we have this industry at all? Because we have bad guys in the world, and it feels like bad guys are always on top of one notch ahead of the good guys. And that keeps the world going. And that keeps this industry going. In fact, that is what it is. If we catch up with the bad guys, then we probably wouldn't have this industry for a long time. Risk Management 101. So a guy giving a presentation, he says, we have narrowed our security risk down to two groups: everyone who works here and everyone who doesn't work here. So that speaks to a little bit of risk management aspect and how people do risk management in the industry. It's a little bit of a pun there. That's a Dilbert article picture you see bottom down. Mordag, the preventer of information services. Security is more important than usability. In a perfect world, no one would be able to use anything. To complete the login procedure, stare directly at the sun. So in that fun and in that pun, there is a very important message. And the message is, as I teach in my classes too, the usability aspect and the security aspect. I mean, look at passwords. The more complex you make it, people are going to write it into sticky notes. They're going to put it in areas where you wouldn't even understand how they're getting that. So you have to strike a balance between what is the art of the possible, what is secure enough, and not more. And this comes by experience. This comes by understanding of the industry. This comes by learning from peers and mentors. What is secure enough and not more? Like if you literally make it so hard, you make yourself the NASAs of the world or the CIAs of the world, then you are probably not doing service to the industry and to your stakeholders too. Ultimately, IT, as they call it, is an enabler to the business. And security, as they call it, is a cost center. These are terms which come up quite often. What is security? You spend money, you keep spending money, you keep spending money. And the management would say, oh, we don't get hacked for the past 3 years. Why do you want us to give you money every time? And the professionals, security professionals, would have to change the understanding from what they call fear, uncertainty, and doubt to more risk management aspects. And this is how the industry has moved on. We are not police forces of the world. We are not police officers who say, thou shalt do that. We are now, this is the risk to you. These are the options where you can manage, mitigate, transfer, or avoid the risk in the organization. So the idea here is to find that, striking that balance. And that would come by experience. That would come by learning from peers and the mentors as you go along in your journey in this world. Okay, as requested, I did risk management assessment. I concluded that there was no risk of any management. Do you have anything to add? I'll get back to you. That's what the manager is saying. So it sometimes feels like management becomes an impediment in doing the right things. And so it's feel like, the people who are the doers on the ground probably know the right things. And that's where the leadership skills come into play. From literally being managers to being leaders who actually get the best out of their team rather than purely managing people and just letting them be the worker bees. And so the idea here is to work together as a team, whether it is your ground professionals with your management, and let management not be an impediment in doing the right things. And that comes again by experience. It comes by collaboration, communication, and in fact being security leaders. And I'll keep saying that word instead of being managers. Yes, you will get designations of managers when you go in your industry and when you go become more experienced in your world. But I would suggest understanding how to motivate your people, how to um, make sure that they understand what is the right thing to do in the industry. Unforeseen risks. How can you be sure there are no unforeseen risks with this plan? It is not possible to know it. One has considered every risk, therefore we can never be sure. So I can still blame you for any problems that come up. Yes, that's part of the process. That is still intact. So again, that's the funny aspect, but there is a learning and there is a message there as well, right? One is risk can never be eliminated. There will always be risks. And the second one is people tend to, when we go through security risk breaches or disclosures, tend to find the blame and blame a person for what they do instead of blaming or understanding the root cause of the issue and fixing the issue. That's sometimes a reality of life in the industry. And folks can correct me who are my learned peers here in later on. And it is the reality sometimes to understand the root cause and shift the root cause away from blaming the person. You know, focus on the letter and not the mailman is a term they call it. Always focus on the message and the content than the actual one who delivering it, because we tend to blur those lines and start counting and calling people for what they do instead of calling out the fact and the issue which we need to resolve. So that's the idea there in terms of risks will always be there, and let's get away from the personal aspect of blaming people to understanding the fact and trying to solve that. Social engineering. I hope all of you probably know what social engineering is all about. There is no patch for stupidity. Anyone who thinks technology can solve a cyber problem, in fact, has not understood the technology and the problem. So these are some revelations, some realizations, some wisdom words which comes up as we go in this industry. Technology is not the holy grail of fixing things. And that's another struggle we go through. People process technology. People call it out a lot many times. But technology is the underlying layer on which we build these business processes. So what you see there literally is in an arena, you have data security. In this corner, we have firewalls, encryption, antivirus software. In this corner, we have Dave. The idea being is, from a security standpoint, it ultimately comes down to humans and humans' level of trust. In fact, if you recall yourselves, every time we have dealings with people ourselves, we trust people implicitly before we untrust them. That's how we are built as human beings. And if we have bad experience, let's say we get burgled, let's say somebody threatens us, or we have a scam on which we get hit, then we figure out, oh, we did something wrong. But we tend to trust people before we untrust them. We look at phishing emails. I mean, why is it so proliferate? it's proliferating so highly in this industry. It's the fact that it ultimately comes down to humans and how they perceive the information they are receiving. PEBCAC. Not sure how many of you know what PEBCAC is. In fact, I'll come to that term. But what you see on the screen here is Moss and his computer buddy. This is a scene I've taken from a YouTube video, and it's a series from UK called the IT Crowd. It's a funny comedy on IT. I absolutely would recommend if anybody is interested to go through these YouTube videos of IT Crowd, and it will definitely make you laugh and also give you some aspects of how security, or in fact IT, in customer service is done. So this is Moss sitting in the office, and he is writing an email to the fire department that there is fire going on right now. So this speaks to how we see and perceive things if we're in the middle of a disaster, and how we take on things, and as the automation in the industry is going on. And help desk, I have never been a help desk person, by the way, as an analyst in my life, but I can appreciate the fact that whenever you get a help desk call, the best thing you can say, have you tried turning on and off your computer again? And I can vouch for this, and I'll be pretty honest in my opinion here. It feels to me sometimes when the technology, the person who is well versed with the technology gets closer to a technology, the technology fixes itself sometimes. I'll give you an example. I have my fridge in my house, and it wasn't working quite well for some time. And one day, a refrigerator guy came. He literally just came, and the fridge started working for no reason, and he couldn't give me a reason why it was not working. Computers. I'm a computer guy. I have a bunch of laptops in my home. They weren't working, and then I opened them up and then just powered them on, and then they started working. Like, okay, technology senses people and folks who use them, and sometimes they're like, I got to get fixed myself before I get into trouble. But in the help desk world, and turning on and off again is also one of the ways you can fix problems. I can tell you, right? Like if something doesn't work, okay, reboot the system and see, yeah, oh yeah, it's working now. And so PEBCAC actually stands for Problem Exists Between Keyboard and Chair. It's a very famous term which a lot of help desk folks use among themselves because they don't want to say it's a human error, or the person calling them saying, my fixed system is not working. So instead of saying, you are the problem, they'll probably say, oh, it's a PEBCAC error. let's figure it out. Let's see how we can solve that problem. So it's just a pun. It's a fun word which is used in the IT service industry. Many times people kind of, just make their life a little bit more lighter as they solve and they help others out. Okay, security is as strong as its weakest link. So this is a thesis which everybody knows, and I would like to post it too as well for folks on the call. Think it for a second. Security is as strong as its weakest link. Think of a chain, all right? And in a chain, because I like philosophy sometimes, I like giving anecdotes and points of statement to bring home a point. And if in a chain, a click of the link of the chain is weak, then the chain will break. In fact, if all other links are strong, that's not going to help a lot. But they use this terminology for humans, right? In a chain of technology, people, and process, humans are the weakest link because we trust before we untrust. But when I was making this presentation, I'll be honest, this was a learning for me because I always understood and thought that thesis was always right. But I was going through a presentation and through some learnings and an article, and it made me think pretty hard. The antithesis to this is people are not the weakest link. They are the most misunderstood link. So think it for a second. Do we as individuals, and you can, think of yourselves and do a little bit of internal thought process. Do we have intentions to be bad or doing bad stuff for our organizations? Keep aside insider threats and others. In general, the public, the systems we use, the technologies we use, we don't want to use it for intentionally bad purposes. We want to use it for the right purpose to do our job. So intentionally, people would like to do the right things. They just don't have the right information, the right tools and technologies, and the right techniques to do that. So to blame people right off the bat and saying that they are the weakest link is probably not a right approach. Is to say how we can enable them, support them through cyber awareness, through other means, through techniques and tools, through information, so that they are able to do the right things and still be able to run with technology. Right? Remember, security and usability are two pieces of the coin. So that was a revelation for me, and I think it changed my perspective of, let's not keep blaming people to be the weakest link, but let's understand how we can enable and empower them in doing the right things, because their intention is not wrong. They might be doing it unintentionally for certain things, except for insider threats where people are motivated to do wrong things. That's a different story altogether. But they are a minority in the bunch. They're not a majority, because we all would like to get along with our lives and do the right things as we go along. So that was my understanding on the social engineering aspect and how to see people and how to see them in the right lens. So cyber awareness, C-suite thinks that they have solved this problem. So what you see there is Moss talking to his IT manager, whose name was Jen, in the IT crowd. That's again an article from the IT crowd, that picture. And he's talking to Jen and saying, this is the internet. In fact, that box he's showing is the internet. And if you read that, and then Jen actually see that video, and then actually takes that the box of the internet and takes it to the board meeting of their organization, and he brings it and says, this is the internet, and she gives a whole spiel about the internet. The fun of that is, and the funny aspect is, sometimes management fails to understand the technology aspect. They fail to understand and connect the dots, and they feel like they have all the right means and they have solved the problem. And the technical people, if you're not technically savvy as a manager, the technical people might cut the corners or put a blind wool through your eyes to get through things. And so that's the learning from this. The fun aspect is he's saying, oh, this is the internet. In fact, the box cannot be an internet, right? But Jen is so serious about it. Oh, yeah, is it the internet? Okay, I'm going to take it to the board. And in fact, when you see that video, it'll be pretty interesting that Moss and his other buddy were on the back of the benches, and they were expecting that the whole crowd were going to laugh with them, because they would say, oh, how can this be the internet when Jen is putting it forth? In fact, when Jen does that, everybody pushes their eyes. Oh, is that really the internet? And so, it's how industry, how people perceive technology, and sometimes they just get the face value of it, and they feel like that's the right thing. So it's the message there is, make sure that you understand what you're speaking about. You understand what the technology, if you're talking about, or the concept you're talking about. And I have a new hobby. It's called phishing. It's again from a Dilbert article. I send fake banking emails to gullible executives. Then I found out their financial information and use it to steal the money they don't deserve. It looks like more of a hacktivist kind of a person. Dear customer, this is your bank. We forgot your social security number and password. Why don't you send them to us so we can protect your money? Sincerely, the IB banker. That looks legit, right? So that is, again, an understanding. If we have a lack of awareness in the industry or a lack of awareness in an organization, you can imagine how people and users and the management perceive it. And again, phishing, I'm not going to preach the choir here, is such an important threat factor which people tend to fall to, and then they share their information. And it has become and evolved over the years and become more realistic. And it's hard to identify sometimes phishing emails from the real ones. Privacy is dead. That's another random blabber. Many of us know, oh, it's my private information. Why would anybody want to share it? Right? So this is the small old man. Mind if I clear my browser history? So the privacy is that it comes from the fact that we and our information is not private anymore. My emotions are encrypted, so to protect the security of our marriage. So imagine like coming to the level of the emotions to protect your love, your relationships. I don't know, we are not to that extent here yet, but um, somebody told me once, and I mean, somebody don't quote me on that perfectly, but even if you're very conservative in sharing your information is literally around 10 to 15 or even 20 companies or organizations in North America or in Western world. And imagine for a second, banks, governments, CRA. In fact, they call it the SIN number, because we do all our sins, and those sins are recorded in that SIN number, and all your things are recorded and known by the government. They call it social insurance number, but there's a pun to that. And so privacy is that you can actually Google an article from Bruce Schneider. He is a very famous person who is in this space, and he speaks about privacy. So don't expect privacy anymore. This world has gone much further ahead from that. Let's understand, if your information is out there and somebody's nefariously using it, how we can reduce the impact to ourselves. That's probably the way we should ask these questions, rather than trying to prevent things from happening, because at some point your information will be shared and will be out in the wild. You have no privacy. Get over it, right? Keep calm and hold on to your britches. And will Social Security be still around? This is more a pun on the government, and it better be. Chinese hackers are depending on it. Stuff talk about China and hacking into the U.S. government ones. In fact, if you want to read through a breach, it was the Office of the Management OMB hack, Office of the Management Budgeting Team in budgeting department in U.S. Read through that. It's a pretty interesting breach. I'm not going to go
I
through
hate
the
China
whole
for it,
details of
bro.
it, but that is the data breach between the government, between China and U.S. GDPR full form. I don't know how many of you know what GDPR stands for. It's the not the General Data Privacy Regulation. It's the giant database of personal records. So GDPR, in fact, is a European privacy legislation. But what the pun here is being called, in fact, it's a giant database of personal records. It's a very stringent regulation on privacy from Europe. But end of the day, I don't know if it's really solving the problem of sharing our privacy, safeguarding our private information out there. So that's the pun there. GDPR compliant. Our customers are complaining because we let hackers get their personal data. So we have decided to change the name of the company, and we disguise ourselves and wear disguises until it all blows over. Take a mustache from the bag and pass it around. So the pun there is people and organizations actually change themselves. They call them they call for bankruptcy, or they will stop operations, come back as another new organization and continue doing things. Your data is out there in the world, and how safe and how private it is up for grabs. It's up for question. So that's the pun around on around privacy and the fact that privacy is dead. It's not that you can keep your data too private in this world. Cyber warfare. I mean, we all know we are amidst a lot of conflict in the world right now. But what this speaks to is, USB keys being dropped as missiles from airplanes. I mean, imagine for a second, and you can drop a USB key, it goes and infects the malware of the computer of the bad guys, and it actually takes over and then go after you instead of sending soldiers on the ground. We need to hack into Russia's systems to get more information on US citizens. So that's another pun out there. And what you also see on the bottom right is US air warfare, US sea warfare, US ground warfare, and now US cyber warfare. So that the message there is from three arms of defense, which used to be always air, land, and sea, the world has moved into the cyber world, cyber warfare. And there's a whole lot chat and a whole presentation we can do on cyber warfare and how far it has gone around so that's what cyber warfare, and it is a term, it is an industry which is coming up quite fast. And so the cyber political satire, this speaks to the politics around cybersecurity and how the American and the Chinese spaces are talking to each other. So this pretty much speaks to Obama and Xi Jinping actually, thinking, oh, do you have my secrets, or do you have my secrets? And ultimately, as I said, there's no privacy at all. So these nation state actors, these big governments and companies, countries, they are going after each other. And there's a lot of literature, a lot of research around this in the world. And in fact, it has become a little bit more of a political fun speak that, is your information secure enough, or we already have copies of it beforehand, before you already know it. So the Senate speech is more about, a CISO talking to the senators, and in fact, it speaks about the politics around cybersecurity. And there's a Senate speech going on, and senator says, "Oh, I agree that we have a serious foreign cyber threat, but there might be one or two bits of flawed logic in this idea to surround our border with alligators mode and swallow foreign hackers." And so, it speaks to how much our public servants in the world, in the government, are they knowing about what do we do in the cyber world? What are some of the security ramifications? And in fact, many of these congressmen and these public servants sometimes need to be made aware of how and what is that it is important in the industry. So it's just a pun on understanding the government understanding the ground impact and realities of cybersecurity in the industry. And in fact, some of these public servants, and there are many hearings out there. In fact, you can go look on in the U.S. government under Senate and Congress speeches around their understanding of cybersecurity and are we doing the right things in trying to solve our problem in the industry here. So it's just a pun on the government regulations. Do they understand the nitty-gritties of the cyber world, or they just comply, creating regulations to keep us? And so password in need is a password indeed. That's a serenity prayer. So password serenity prayer is grant me the serenity to accept that my password will be hacked, the courage to frequently change it, and the wisdom to come up with a better one. And in fact, we all can speak to ourselves on how our passwords are strong enough or not, and whether they are something we can deal with. And it's just a way of understanding that our passwords at some point will be hacked. So let's look at ways how we can secure ourselves, either through multi-factor authentication, through other cybersecurity means, because it's an old adage, passwords are so weak these days, or the stronger you make them, it's not going to solve a problem here. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a pun there. A father is looking at his son who is pretty much learning how to speak, and you can create a password out of that. And the password serenity prayer is that, yeah, we will be hacked some point in time. Let's just be ready for it. So Murphy's laws on AI is more around artificial intelligence, and it speaks to artificial intelligence being the key and important, and it's an ongoing field. And at some point, these robots, which we think are doing work for us, the equation will be flipped, and we human beings will be, in fact, be the ones who will be more or less, serving these robots or this AI, which is coming up so fast in the industry.
So, Prashant, could you please reshare the screen?
Oh, okay. Let me do that. Confirm me if you can see my screen. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. I'll go quickly because I know from the interest of time, it is 8 minutes left for the presentation. So Murphy's laws on disaster, this is something which I thought was pretty interesting and relevant. So when a disaster has to occur, it will occur. And we just need to be prepared for it. You cannot avoid or prevent a disaster. So we look at ways how to make that the fact that it's a Murphy's law. If things have to go wrong, they will go wrong. If everything is going right, there must be something wrong in the system. So in fact, that's the understanding on the disaster side. And foolproof disaster recovery plan. Governments have our secrets. So the best is that if you want to do disaster recovery, you can go talk to the government and say, can you give us our secrets? Can you give us our documentation? Because that's where they, I'm sure, would have everything we know about and do about our lives, even whether it's organizations, whether it's on the personal front. And so that's the idea on disaster recovery, more on the fun side, that it is about, it's going to happen. Let's just get over it and be prepared for it, rather than preventing, being on the detection side and being prepared to respond to it. Clouds are infallible. We know all clouds are there. So it's just the way of saying, oh, cloud is somebody else's data center and servers out there. Thunder and lightning isn't God being angry. It's Microsoft and Google fighting in the clouds. So we know Microsoft and Google clouds, and in fact, they have their own ways of getting the market share. And this is mom doing Kubernetes. If anybody's interested in what Kubernetes is, do Google it. It's the Docker containers. It's how Kubernetes works in the industry. So it's just giving some pun to cloud is not a something out there. It's just it's somebody's data center. Your systems are secured and served there. And what do we mean by that, and how do we understand that? For the nerds, and I've been ignoring all security alarms for several months. You have been doing what? I figured I ignored them, then maybe they'd go away. So that's another way of like an ostrich putting his head in the sand and thinking like, oh, the cat is not coming to eat me. So instead of assuming that things are going to go solve themselves, or I don't care, I ignore, and things are going to go away. That sometimes the folks in the industry, in the security operations centers and others, they feel like, oh, these alarms don't make sense to me. So that's more on the fun side. But on the practical side, let's be very careful on these alarms, what they come out, and be very, very, very important and very careful to respond to them in a timely fashion. This is the last one. Thanks you for listening to me. This is James Franco, who's an Hollywood artist. And my wife asked me why I spoke softly in the house. I said I was afraid of Mark Zuckerberg for listening. She laughed. I laughed. Alexi laughed, and Siri laughed. Thank you very much. Thank you, and appreciate for you all listening and understanding. If you have any questions, comments, either now or do connect me over LinkedIn and others. So over back to you, Aslam. If anybody has any questions or comments, definitely happy to help.
Thank you so much, Prashant, for this very interesting presentation. So we will take questions now. Please raise your hand. Use the raise hand button. So please go ahead, Ebubichi.
Hello, Prashant. Please confirm if you can hear me well.
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear
Ibubi.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, I must say that this has been a very wonderful presentation and very insightful, especially the way you referred to the user link aspect of it, not just our error nose interpretation of it being the weakest link. However, my question would be, there was a slide you showed where the hacker had to compromise the security of an organization, and the presentation was they weren't considered, the hacker perspective weren't considered, and you kind of discuss about how we only focus on compliance and audit. So my question is, I suppose that compliance and audit and frameworks were done in cognizance of the current trend in terms of how the hacker conducts his activity, and which also include penetration testing in some of the compliance and the frameworks that we have. Are there any other way that we can take cognizance of the hacker's perspective beyond these other ways?
So thank you, Abu. It's a very good question. I can understand coming from an audit and assurance standpoint, what are the right things? What are the things we are doing? Are there the right things we are doing, trying to make sure that we handle the hacker's perspective? So one thing I'd like to share before I answer that question in general is another anecdote or statement I abide by, and that is compliance is not security. Security enables compliance. Sometimes we fail to understand that doing a compliance check means we are secure enough as an organization. I can give you many examples. Again, with the interest of time, I won't go into details here. And if we do security right or enough with the right understanding, compliance should be an outcome. You should be able to understand that you are connecting the dots with any of those frameworks in the industry. And security should be the main goal. So the idea here is to understand what is important for an organization, what are its impacts. So you definitely have to bring in the risk management framework. And from the risk management framework, then you drive out and see, I build a program around cybersecurity. Can I connect the dot with NIST? Can I connect the dot with COBIT? Can I connect the dot with PCI compliance? Can I connect the dot with other regulations? So that should be the mindset and approach, rather than saying, oh, let's look at PCI compliance as an example and the standards, and let's follow from there and build controls in our environment. So we have to flip the equation and understand that focus on security, do it right, keep your impacts low, understand the hackers or the folks who impact you, and then connect from there and see how you can impact and safeguard and be compliant with those regulations you have. Happy to chat. Otherwise, if you have more questions down the road offline. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? Any more questions? Yes, please go ahead, Liduk.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just have one small question: that where did you get those images? You created them, or is there any source to get those images? Because I want to use them for my lectures.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm happy to share this presentation, by the way, offline if anybody wants. Again, there's nothing confidential here. So certainly, Leduc, if you want to send me an email, happy to do that. Otherwise, I'm not an artist by any means. So they are definitely Googled and they are coming out from search. But there are other ways you can build beautiful slides as well, which I can take offline with you. There are actually AI software which can build ones for you. But these ones are just from Google. I did a little bit of research to build the presentation. Then I can send you a copy if that helps you out.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Prashant, for the interesting presentation. Please don't forget to provide us with your email and the full name to give you the attendance certificate. So we will see you next month in our InfoSec seminar. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.